Best for last. We're going to talk about annuities. So it sounds as if in this legislation, the insurance companies got their hands on it and did some lobbying and trying to make sure that annuities can be built in and be easier for retirement vehicles. There's no bad financial concept. It is bad application, I think, is the best way to say that.
This one got me really hot under the collar. I'm going to be honest. This is like letting the fox into the henhouse, to use the metaphor, but just everything about it is asinine to me. I think it's at the detriment of the consumer. It unfortunately will come back to bite the legislators in the ass, in my opinion.
Welcome to Critical Thinking Required, hosted by LBW. This podcast is intended for free thinkers, entrepreneurs, and knowledge seekers. Join us as we discuss relevant financial topics, explore with guests their financial journeys, and engage with experts in industries such as space, media and entertainment, real estate, and many more. Buckle up and enjoy the ride.
Welcome to Critical Thinking Required. You're with your host, myself, Tim Bickmore, and my colleague, Nathaniel Leach. And we're missing Dan today, but that's okay. Today, we are going to be talking about Secure Act 2.0. This is new legislation that is in debate. It has not been signed into law quite yet. And Nathaniel and I just want to kind of hit on some of the topics that are being debated, and we want to have discussions about it and what our thoughts are. There are some interesting proposals that can benefit the citizens of the United States from a retirement perspective. And there are some other ones that Nathaniel and I may have some differing opinions than what legislation is maybe set forth. So before we jump into these topics, I just want to ask everybody who's listening or viewing this podcast that if you do enjoy our content, please share, subscribe, and like what we do. We're all over the place. If you can just like our content, we would really appreciate it. It really helps us out to continue to do what we like to do, which is talk about finance. Okay, with that being said, Nathaniel, we probably have about 6 to 10 topics to hit on. We'll see how fast we can kind of go through this. So again, for our listeners, the Secure Act 2.0, it's legislation that is being currently debated, and it has to do with retirement plans, annuities, RMD requirements, catch-up contributions for contributions into 401ks, things in that manner. So the first one that we want to talk about first and foremost is this increased catch-up contribution. This increased catch-up contribution is very interesting. It actually only applies to people who are 62, 63, or 64. When Nathaniel and I were talking about this, Nathaniel was like, wait, that's confusing. There is a catch-up contribution for people over the age of 50, but that is not to be confused with this new potential catch-up contribution, which only applies to those people 62, 63, and 64. It would allow them to contribute an additional $10,000 to their qualified retirement plan. So that's quite a bit. But I'm curious, Nathaniel, what are your thoughts on this point within Secure Act 2.0?
Honestly, I think it's pretty dumb to just segregate it to those particular years. I don't quite understand the logic to that. It's just picking 3 random years of your age where you can increase your I call like a top up or a catch up contribution. And this is applicable to the 401k specifically, which is typically a $6,500 extra per year you can put into your 401k if you're above the age of 50. But for the ages of 62, 63, and 64, as Tim mentioned, you can put an additional $3,500. So for a total of $10,000. And this would be starting in 2024. Where's the logic in that? Look, don't get me wrong. I think it's great that there's catch-up contributions that amount is increasing. But what the hell is the mindset? What's the logic behind sticking it to those particular years? To me, this doesn't make any sense. I think it's great overall, but who's going to know this? I mean, but I guess the CPAs, but the CPAs are reactive generally. They're not going to be proactive in saying, oh, you can put more, you can contribute more to your IRA. They're instead going to be asking, how much did you contribute to your IRA this year? That's all they're going to be asking. They're not going to be asking, hey, did you top up extra on this particular year because you're this age? No.
That's a really solid point. And just to clarify as well, the $10,000 would be for 401ks, 403bs. And then for simple plans, for example, for maybe a small business owner, that'd be an additional 5,000. So what's hard, I think Nathaniel brings up a good point, is if you're not aware and you go do your taxes, the CPA may not even ask about it. Technically, it's through an ERISA plan through your employer. And they may not even know. They may not even ask. They may see it on your W-2, obviously, when you can see where your contributions are coming in. And so it's really kind of up to the participant within the plan to really know that they can make up that catch-up contribution, which is really important. And I kind of agree with Nathaniel. Maybe their logic is, Social Security technically starts at 62. Maybe they're kind of gapping it into like Medicare, maybe. But for most people who are going into retirement in those years, they've probably saved enough to be able to retire. So it's a benefit for sure. Like, I'm not going to debate that, but again, I guess the overall purpose or what they're thinking is like, if someone isn't going to be able to retire, if somebody to retire or not retire is a difference of 30 grand over 3 years, I think that's a really tight spread there, right? Like, I don't know if it's going to make it or break it. Like, yes, it's a great addition. I'm not going to, again, deny that, but it's just more of the validity of it or the purpose. I'm not really sure either. So those are my comments on that.
And with that, we can move on to, I think you're going to hit the increased RMD age.
Correct. Yes, Nathaniel. So within this bill, they are proposing that they increase the required minimum distribution age. So our listeners and viewers are aware, yes, if you have a traditional IRA, you are required to take distributions at a certain age. That age has actually changed quite a bit in the last year. It used to be 70 and a half. It is now 72. And the proposal, what they're looking to propose for the RMD extension, is it's actually going to be a step up from a year to year. So what they're proposing is that by 2022, the RMD age would be 73. By 2029, they're going to increase it to 74. And then finally, by 2032, in 10 years, it would be 75. Which means that if you hold a traditional IRA, as current law states, you would be forced to take a certain amount out of that account, regardless if you need it or not. What they're really doing is that the government's saying, hey, everybody, it's my turn to earn my taxes. So cash it out. Let me get my taxes and you can do whatever else you want with it. But they are looking to increase those ages over time. So, Fanny, what do you got on that one?
It does allow for a longer period of time for tax deferred growth, which is extremely powerful. But then in return, you're giving up. You're having to. There's more years where you're paying taxes up front to the government in order to make that contribution to those IRAs for traditional IRAs, so in return, you're kind of giving up something and the government's getting their money earlier than originally planned. And then also, in theory, if your IRA is given more time to grow, then the size of the asset grows, and then therefore the calculations used to calculate your RMD, it's likely going to mean a higher RMD amount is going to be, you're going to be forced to withdraw. So therefore, potentially higher taxes then as well. But so it might be kind of an even trade-off. Maybe, I don't know. We'll have to see how it goes with time, but I think it'd be worth it in the end.
I think you bring up a really solid point when it comes to taxation. Just to clarify for our listeners and viewers, as Nathaniel mentioned, when you take money out of an IRA account, it is considered taxable income. So as Nathaniel mentioned, as that account grows, you may have to take a larger amount out because you have a higher account value, which means you could drive up more taxation depending on what brackets you sit on and other income streams that the individual or household may have. And so he is right. You could be in a tax situation that you don't want to be in, which it could, it depending again on the situation and the person, you could look at Roth conversions to try to lower that or try to mitigate some of that over time. So it does allow for a little bit of more planning when it comes to that type of situation. currently, as it states, Roths are not required to take required minimum distributions. I always like to talk about this. It was the Obama administration, the second term, where they proposed RMDs on Roth accounts, which it did not pass. So at some point, I could see the government tapping into that type of legislation to try to get that switched. Again, maybe, maybe not. But if it is the case, it's something we just have to plan on and look at and see if it makes sense. But extending the RMDs could bring up different planning scenarios or subjects when it just comes to a taxation, like Nathaniel mentioned. I think it's beneficial. The only other comment is it's interesting. I would assume they're doing this because people are living longer, but I have also seen some research that we're not living as long as maybe one would perceive. And it also maybe could help too if people are continuing to work later ages as well, just not requiring more income to come out. That could be part of maybe the conversation. I don't know. I might be digging too deep on those two subjects, but overall, I think it's not a terrible thing. It just allows for different planning opportunities. Okay, so what about, Nathaniel, the employer match? It sounds like employers may have the ability to match contributions in 401ks to a Roth component, which they are not allowed to do currently.
This could be, I got really excited when I saw this because this could be boom. So when an employer today makes a match to an employer sponsored plan of some sort, so a 401k, 403, whatever be the case, they are forced to make it to the traditional side within the 401k, provided that it has a Roth. Okay, let me back up. Some 401ks have both a traditional and a Roth component, two components in one plan. And I, as the employee, can make a contribution all to the Roth side. But then if the employer has a match, they can only make their match contribution for whatever I put in into the traditional side. What this legislation is saying, it would allow for the Roth to receive that employer match, which can be extremely powerful.
That's something we'll probably just have to watch. It is interesting. It could be a benefit for the employee, especially for high earners, because they don't have the ability to access Roth accounts that easily. Typically, it's really through their 401ks, and there are no income limitations on 401ks if the 401k allows for a Roth, which is powerful. And so it could be a really big benefit on the employee side. Now, this is one I know that you got excited about as well, is that it sounds like if, let's say, an employee does not contribute to their 401k, but they're paying off their student loans, it sounds like the employer can match that payment and they can, similar to the 401k. Do you want to talk about that one a little bit on the student loan?
Yeah, sure. Yes, it did indeed get me excited because if you have an employee who's trying to pay off those student loans, it of course makes much more sense for them to focus on the majority, if not all of their excess cash flow towards those student loan repayments, because that's like a yoke around their neck versus making contributions to an employee sponsored plan. But what this legislation is proposing is that for those employees who are making those student loan payments, that the employer will in lieu of that employee making the contribution to the employer plan, that the employer will then match whatever the employee is making in payments towards their student loans, so that the employee is still getting that powerful, essentially free money into a retirement plan in their name.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I don't have too much to add to Nathaniel's comments other than we talk a lot about student loans, and in the last, really just like pre-COVID going into COVID, the government's done a lot of work to try to help with the student loan crisis, if you want to call it. Even with some of the changes they made with the public service loan forgiveness program and the waiver they did from 2021 going up all the way up until October of 2022 is really powerful. And a lot of people have gotten their loans forgiven, and they made sweeping changes because they really fell flat, in my opinion, on how they even set that up. And they made at least a corrective course, which was great. But even with the student loan matching, it's just another, I think, emphasis that the government is looking to try to help with student loans in different capacities. And this is just one incentive that they obviously seem to be putting forth, saying, hey, this could also be a benefit to be able to get a match for contributing to your student loans. So this is pretty nice. They are doing some work there. Okay, so the next one. So this is interesting. A lot of people typically don't know about this, but it is in this legislation. They are trying to promote the savers credit, which is typically a credit that low to medium income earners can get if they are contributing to savings, such as retirement. The bill is proposing that they increase for people who qualify the credit at 50% rather than it having declining as they earn more. And they're proposing to make the change starting in 2027. And they also are trying to help promote this, forcing the Treasury to print more promotional materials, which, again, I don't know if that's going to help or not, but sounds cool from the Treasury. But overall, it's just if you save towards a retirement account, you will get a benefit for that or a credit on taxes, and they're trying to up it and promote it more so people can take advantage. Any thoughts on that, Fanny?
Great.
That is a good one. It's a good one. Okay, so we're going to jump in. This one might be not a hot debate, but it might be a debate between Nathaniel and I. So the next piece of legislation we want to talk about is this idea of auto enrollment. So within the Secure Act 2.0, what they are trying to do is expand automatic enrollment, and which essentially automatically enrolls an employee into a 401k or 403b at 3%, and then that then they will automatically increase your contribution by 1% until you hit 10%. You can, just to clarify, this is an automatic enrollment, but you can opt out. You don't have to opt in. It's opting out of this program. And what they're trying to do, and there's been a lot of research on this, is to help people save. Because sometimes they don't realize they have access to a 401k, they miss the materials, and they have done research where automatic enrollment has helped increase people's pay. It's very similar to what, like a pension, where pensions used to be more prevalent within the United States, and they've kind of gone away, where you automatically enrolled into that pension and you put some of your salary towards it, your company would match it. So this is kind of the same idea that they're trying to promote going forward. And this has been a really hot topic since I've really been in the industry, which has been over 10 years. So it's an interesting, they're trying to expand it, I think. So this one, I have concerns about it. And I was telling Nathaniel earlier before we joined the podcast that I feel like it's a philosophical discussion. Maybe it's not philosophical. It might be a poor word choice on my part here, but I understand what we're trying to do. And I understand that they're trying to increase savings for employees. The hard part, though, is I think there is also detriments to doing this. People, sometimes don't even realize they're enrolled. Sometimes they don't even know that they have been doing it. Sometimes they change jobs so fast that you're going to have these lost accounts, which Nathaniel will probably hit on what they're also trying to do. But you have accounts that you don't know that you had. I think for people who are lower income earning, it can be a detriment where they don't have the ability to save towards retirement. Even though it sounds great, it may be automatically forcing them into debt, and that debt's going to be more detrimental than them contributing to a 401k. So I think that it sounds really, really great when you look at it on the front level or the face level. But for what this bill is trying to do and who it's trying to promote towards, I think there also can be detrimental effects. Now, I'm not going to act like I'm an expert on this. There's been a lot of research. Richard Thaler has been like the person who's been trying to promote this automatic contribution. And I have read a lot of papers that state that this does help with savings over time. But I'm just curious on what it also is doing on the back end from a planning perspective of how much debt these people may be recurring or racking up through credit cards or other easy access to credit because they don't realize they're contributing some of their paycheck directly to a 401k. So it's just something that I think should be more so pointed out. But I also, again, on the opposite side, understand what they're trying to achieve, and you can't always get your cake and eat it too. So those are my concerns.
I try and always be balanced, but sometimes it's like I can be a bulldog when I see something that's like, it's like so clear to me. It's like duh, it was just, But Tim does bring up some good points in that if we're talking about lower income, I had an experience when I was in the Marines. I was Before I joined the Marines, I loved talking about this stuff, about retirement fund vehicles to do so, Roth IRAs. I was all about Roth IRAs, still am to this day. But when I spoke to the fellow Marines in my shop, they didn't know anything about this sort of stuff. That was fine, but I then began to understand that they didn't. For some of them, they didn't know about this stuff or they didn't care to learn about it because they were so focused or had been focused earlier on in their lives with just getting by. Like they weren't as fortunate as I was to be able to start saving money away in a Roth IRA at such a young age, because my family was okay. I mean, we were good. We were like upper middle class, to be quite frank. So I didn't have to worry about making sure I had clothes to wear to school or being able to eat out with the family. Like, could we afford to do that this month or something like that? They were more focused on just living to paycheck, getting by, making sure that they could go to college or university. How are they going to pay for that? I didn't have those kinds of concerns. So therefore, they didn't know about this stuff or care to know about this stuff because it wasn't a priority for them. So Tim's point on that is, I believe, accurate. That there are, as with anything, there's opportunity costs, no matter how you shake it. However, I think that on the whole, that this is a good idea, an auto enrollment, because once you start somebody on the path of savings automatically out of their paycheck, it's out of sight, out of mind. It's no longer within their purview. They're not counting on that money in, I would argue, the majority of cases to live off of. For some lower income people, that is not accurate. But I think for the majority of people, I think that is, because you mentioned like credit card balances, that they could be racking those up. I'm willing to bet money that the majority of credit card balances are unnecessary and that people are spending beyond their means in the first place, not because they are looking for sustenance in order to live, to survive, but that they're spending because they're just simply spending beyond their means. They have to get the latest and greatest fashion, the latest and greatest iPhone or car or Chanel purse or something like that. And they're living beyond their means. I think that's a real thing. And I think that that's applicable to the majority of people here in the US is what I would argue.
I think so. And that is the other side of the story. And again, it's a balance. I think what's difficult is that we're talking about savings in a retirement account. And I don't know the stats off the top of my head, which I wish I would have looked this up before we joined the podcast. But the vast majority of the United States doesn't even have enough quote unquote emergency fund. So that's where I struggle, right? Where it's like, I get that we're trying to put it away for the long term and it makes sense and it's tax deductible. But we also have to somehow promote this idea of having an emergency fund so people don't fall into credit card debt. And yes, there could be the argument that people are spending above their means and they, to be able to reduce that and change, which comes back to, like, again, financial literacy or education and how do we promote that. But I do also gonna agree with you in the sense that, it's progress. I think it's moving forward. It's an ability to show that, hey, we're trying to help the vast majority of employees out. I think that you could argue that, do you really have a choice to opt out? I think there's been too much research where if you just have, the checkbox opt in or opt out, if you have to opt out, the majority of people just won't do it because they don't look at it like that. That's more framing from a psychological standpoint. But I guess where I come from more so is just the lack of education in general, which is really not a, I guess, negative connotation on this rule. I think it's just a negative connotation in general. which just happens to filter down to this specific rule. But you make solid points, and I think that it's a good step in the right direction. But I think we have to be aware that there are potential harmfalls or pitfalls to it as much as there are benefits. And then the last piece that I was just going to mention the loss accounts, unless you got something, Danny.
Yeah, no, that's what I was going with too, that they're also proposing creating a database for employees who are moving from job to job to job, that they can then locate any plans that they've left at past employers, including 401ks and pensions. And I think that if they can corral that, that would be phenomenal. But I can't imagine the cost and logistics involved to achieve that. But I think that makes sense. I think that's a good thing to do. And to me, that's like a cost that would require increased costs for the government to subsidize. But I think it's something that is well worth it.
Yeah, I'd agree with that one. Okay, last topic for the Secure Act 2.0, our favorite, annuities.
Best for last.
Best for last. We're going to talk about annuities. So it sounds as if in this legislation, the insurance companies got their hands on it and did some lobbying and trying to make sure that annuities can be built in and be easier for retirement vehicles. In a couple different ways. It sounds like they're trying to offer annuities to ease the technical kind of ramifications of RMDs. And they're also making additional qualified longevity annuity contracts more appealing by increasing the amount increasing the amount you can put in for retirement savings by the policy. So allowing you to put more into it. I think, I don't know if this is a bulldog or not. I guess I'll start by saying that annuities there is no bad financial concept. It is bad application, I think, is the best way to say that. And annuities can be beneficial in certain circumstances for certain people. I'm not going to deny that. But I do not believe that it's for the vast majority of individuals, given other opportunities to invest in different things and different vehicles. So the opportunity cost. So the ability to make it easier to get into annuities, I just don't know that I necessarily agree with. I think that there's other ways that can be beneficial, because they also don't talk about if you wanted to get out of annuities. Annuities are not always the easiest to get out of due to fees. There are still a lot of fees built in within these products. Now, once again, I'm not going to poo-poo it and say, hey, we should never have annuities. I think there is a realm for where it does make sense. But just to me, this sounds like, again, the insurance companies got their hands on this legislation and did some moves to make it so they can sell their product and get more money into their products. So overall, I think my last comment before I pass it to Nathaniel is, I just think our viewers and listeners should just ask, be aware, educate yourself specifically on annuities, and if it makes sense for you or not. We're always happy to talk about that conversation. And I think that one good frame of reference is look at your other opportunities to do other vehicles, which could be your 401k or other investments within your 401k outside of the annuity. And what does it provide? What are the surrender charges? What if I want to get out? I mean, going through some of those nuanced details can probably help you understand if it's the right fit for you or not, but they're definitely trying to make it easier for you to think it is the right fit. So make sure you always say, as Nathaniel says, what are the incentives? The incentives are that the insurance companies get paid more. Nathaniel, what do you got?
This one got me really hot under the collar. I'm going to be honest. This is like letting the fox into the hen house, to use the metaphor. This is, to your point about what you're just leading off there with, about do the research that makes the most sense for you. I mean, the majority of people don't know what a mutual fund is. They don't understand what a stock is. Do you think that they're going to know what the annuity is within their 401k plan? No.
Or how it works. I mean, those and the annuity contracts are complicated. The projections, they don't even give you all the project. Yeah, anyways, I could go on days for that, but yes, they are complicated.
Oh man,
pages.
Oh, this is just so scary to me, because the legislators think that, oh, we're giving people a guaranteed rate of return with some of these annuity products. They're going to have an assured, I don't know, 3 or 4% growth rate. This is great. They're never going to lose money. Okay. First of all, the insurance company behind the annuities, they could go belly up. What happens to the annuity?
Well, duh.
Second of all,
they got insurance to back them. That's what happens.
oh, and reinsurance. Okay, there's a whole other issue. The insurance industry, just for those people who are interested in the business thesis behind the insurance industry is chock full of insurance companies who have gone out of business because they constantly write business to generate premiums, right? They have a high volume, even when the pricing doesn't make sense to them. So their risk goes up simply because they're trying to write as much volume as they can on the insurance. So it is cratered with bankrupt insurance companies. All right. The odds of insurance companies going belly up is high. So I don't really go into insurance if I can help it, if we're speaking from an investment thesis point of view. So that's just one con against annuities, but just everything about it is asinine to me. I think this is going to be one of those ones where it's going to come back and bite at the detriment of the consumer. It unfortunately will come back to bite the legislators in the ass, in my opinion.
It'll be interesting to see. It does definitely increases revenue streams, though. I can tell you that if they can get access to 401ks more or with ease. So those are the points for the Secure Act 2.0. Nathaniel, I think we can go kind of give our final thoughts. I can start us off, and then you can end the podcast for us. I think overall, Secure Act 2.0, I think the government's trying to do what they're trying to do to benefit the citizens of the United States. I think, as noticed within this conversation, that Nathaniel and I don't agree with everything within the legislation, but I think that's with any legislation. I think there's going to be positives and there's going to be cons to it. But overall, some of the things they're trying to make happen are trying to benefit people. And what I do like too is they're trying to benefit people on the lower to medium income level as well, which is great. I think that's just always I think it's just a great move in general. The Rmd ages is interesting. I think the one that really kind of just baffles me the most, which I agree with Nathaniel, is the increased contribution limits for catch up for 62, 63, and 64. I'd be curious on more details on why, like what's going on there. And then my last comment too is that this again is just being debated. This has not been written into law. So these could change, or it could not pass at all, or it can get completely rewritten. So I just wanted to mention that. And then obviously, as it continues to come to fruition, we can keep people updated and let you know, hey, here's the new rules, especially if it comes down to Rmd ages, which is a big deal, or even increased contributions, because if you can do it and we should do it, then let's make some more contributions within those age frames as well. And then the savers credit obviously too is a big deal. If people can save at a lower to medium income, to be able to get that credit on their taxes, which is beneficial. And then being aware of auto enrollment and annuities. So we got Nathaniel.
Well, you hit them all, Tim. I would just say that I would echo your comment about that. Overall, this is, I think, a good thing if this were to pass in its current form. But as with any piece of legislation that is eventually written into law, there are pros and cons with everything. So educate yourself. Be aware of what is out there to your favor. Take advantage of what's available to you. But then, as a consequence of having these advantages available to you, there's also going to be those disadvantages that, if you're not careful, you can fall into. Case in point, I think, is this whole annuities within employment retirement plans. That's just gonna blow up. That is a perfect example of watching where you step, in my opinion. But as Tim said, there are circumstances where annuities can make sense, but you have to be educated about them, about the opportunities in front of you. Know what you are investing in. That's dogma for any kind of investment vehicle. Understand what you're investing in. Know what you are doing. Be rational about it. And with that, we're going to wrap up today's podcast. We thank you for listening, and we hope you have a wonderful evening.
Thank you for taking the time to start your journey of thinking differently and listening to LBW talk about stuff they love. Until next time.